Bitcoin may be cooling off, but we have some of the most bullish news that we've ever seen for the crypto market happening this week. Also, Ethereum looking very jumpy, still outperforming and looking like it could break through $4,000. What is driving this bullishness? What's happening in the market and the news? Luckily, we've got NLW here to unpack it all on the Friday 5. Let's go.
Let's go.
It's been another one of those not quiet summer weeks that we have gotten used to here in 2025. A lot happening. I would argue some of the biggest stories that we've had yet, but of course we'll forget about them by Saturday.
Yeah,
but man, wow. A lot going on here. I guess we could jump right in. Listen, we'll do the most boring thing first, which is Bitcoin has entered a bullish cooldown phase. So like apparently now that we're at 16,000 and chilling with Bitcoin, that's bad. But we have Ethereum looking like it might jump through 4,000. It's August, man. This is supposed to be the worst month of the entire year. And here we are at $116,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah, listen, I love a good narrative architecture, and bullish cooldown is actually a great phrase. Like, the funny thing about it is that I actually think it's a useful descriptor. Like, that actually says pretty well, I think, what's going on. There's, basically the foot has come off the gas for a variety of reasons. There's plenty of factors going on around and outside the asset that make it sort of pause. But bullish cooldown, I think, is sort of accurate or reflective of the fact that, we like all of our language around these things is dramatic, right? If it stops going up, that means we are crashing right on back down. So yeah. I think it's a great phrase, even regardless of the fact that it's a little pitchy.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I think that it's decent and it's probably accurate. And the fact that we're not down 45% in August is probably really good news when we usually get these brutal summers. But let's just dig into the news. There's so much, and almost all of it is tied to the United States government in one way or another, which has become the trend clearly throughout the summer and since Trump took over. But SEC declares liquid staking is outside of securities law in latest guidance following Project Crypto Initiative. So dig in.
Listen, so this is a big one. It's a little bit, the discourse around it has been interesting. So this follows from the big sort of Paul Atkins speech that we got around that basically is sort of decriminalizing, four-letter wording securities, right? Part of what was so powerful about that speech that we got from the new SEC chair is not only that it was sort of allowing crypto to have a seat at the securities table and find ways to play and do interesting things. It was also a broader reminder that innovation around securities is a big, important part of American financial markets. It's part of why they've been successful, and we want to encourage that, not discourage that. And that's such a breath of fresh air coming off of just absolutely years where crypto had to constantly make sure and argue, in every way possible that nothing it was doing had any sort of resemblance to securities types transactions. And so that was the sort of frame setting speech. Now we're starting to get specific manifestations of that, right? And this, I think, is part of that. So this was guidance around liquid staking, is very kind of detailed and nuanced, probably beyond the scope of the show to go into the exact details. But what was interesting about it was the SEC was very clearly saying, this is an important path on the road to this sort of broader, bringing crypto into the traditional financial system. I think a lot of the folks who are now have to go figure out what to do with this guidance feel like maybe it creates, it opens up as many questions as it solves. But I think that if you kind of read the tea leaves, and I think Nate Garassi, formerly of the ETF store, said this pretty clearly. To him, it looked like they were trying to clear the way for staking with the ETH ETFs, basically. And I think that that's probably the right way to read this.
And more clarity on staking as a service, which was one of the big. You can't hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I wonder if it's me.
It might be you. I can, my mic is on. Can you guys hear me in the comments? You'll be able to tell me, because otherwise I won't know if something happened there. Can you hear me in the comments? Check. Nobody's even commenting.
I cannot hear.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, they hear me. It's NLW. You can't hear me. Guys, you can say whatever you want about him now.
Hello?
He can't hear you.
Nope.
Yeah.
Still,
Can you
I'm
hear
going to
me?
refresh.
Check. Cool. We're going to get a refresh from NLW. I'm going to talk more about that. I think the best tweet of the entire week, as I've mentioned on other shows, was when Jesse Powell, the founder of Kraken, simply quote tweeted this news and said, "Can I get a $30 million refund?" Because you guys might remember that they paid $30 million fine effectively for staking as a service. Can you hear me now?
I can. Yeah. I don't know what that
You're
was.
back. No, that's
Yeah.
cool. So I was just saying that what I was leading into there, and I just mentioned obviously Jesse Powell's hilarious
Yeah.
tweet.
Can I get a
And
refund?
can I get my 30 million back? But this, liquid staking is oddly specific, but this
Yep.
also really lets you know that staking as a service, which a lot of these exchanges are providing, and was one of the major sticking points of the last administration, is going to be fine.
Yeah. I would view this as likely the first guidance of a set of guidance around these issues, and they just didn't want to take on too much. We're not used to this, but we're in a paradigm now where they don't have to deal with everything all at once in every communication, because this is just part of now what they do. This is just, it's actually considered part of their job, which is, nice.
Crazy to think about that. And listen, the person kind of behind all of it, who's been driving even anything reasonable from the SEC through the Gensler era, of course, is Hester Peirce. And she gave a banger of a speech here. Zealously defend financial privacy in crypto era. If you missed it, peanut butter and watermelon financial privacy in the digital age. And this, of course, we had the Roman storm kind of at the end, but I'm going to tie that into this one. So what's Peirce talking about here?
I mean, look, what this represents to me is the fact that now that the leading advocates don't have to fight tooth and nail for every small common sense change that needs to be, and a lot of those balls are now rolling down the hill. Peirce gets to turn her energy to the bigger, larger kind of arguments like this that are about sort of much more fundamental issues. And I think that's what this speech is it's a call for the instantiation in politics of rights to privacy. She talks through all the different ways that all the different privacy preserving technologies, what they mean, but ultimately it's just a sort of a much broader call than around any one specific thing.
Do you think that this is inspired by the fact that this case was ongoing and just ended? Tornado Cash co-founder found guilty but avoids worse counts? Or do you think that she's just taking the opportunity and the tailwinds to make sure that people realize that everything has not been addressed and that privacy is a major issue?
I think it's a combination. I think that she's it would be very strange for it to be completely unrelated given the timing, right? I think that, the Tornado Cash trial has brought up one of the parts of it that's sort of most relevant for our industry is that even in the context of everything getting better, basically, there's still this sort of criminal prosecution, which, we'll get into it, but really ran in the face of previous guidance. It shows that there's still real questions around how the government is and will look at these issues. And also that a lot of the changes that are being made right now are likely to be fragile changes that could be walked back. And so, I would be very surprised if it was completely unrelated. Let's put it that way.
Well, listen, while we're on the topic, let's talk about what happened in the Tornado Cash. Basically, he was found guilty of one of the three charges. Some would argue that it was the least of the three and the easiest to fight, which we will see. Apparently, when he left the courtroom, he actually had a smile on his face and said, good, because this one I can definitely fight back against, and I can go home and see my kids, right? But still a very dangerous potential precedent being set here if this sticks.
Yeah. So basically, it was a sort of conspiracy to run an unlicensed money transmitter business was the one that he was found guilty on. The other two were actually committing money laundering, intent to do that. Those are the ones that had a hung jury, right? And so what's interesting is that the charge that he was found guilty on was basically predicated on the judge throwing out 2019 FinCEN guidance as something that the jury could consider. She basically, right at the top of the trial, said that you can't consider that, right? You can't include that guidance as part of this. However, in the wake of it, she acknowledged that it was an extremely fluid, open question. She thought that this question in particular was some of the most interesting. She also declined to remand him during the sort of the period before sentencing and before, potential appeals. She basically made kind of a two-part point, which was one, one is there's very likely to go to appeals. This guy has a good reason to want it to go to appeals. I don't think he's a flight risk because there's so much room to contest.
What a statement.
This. Yeah.
What a statement. No, this is probably wrong. So
exactly. And two, there's
like guys,
really good
you
standing.
blew this.
Yeah. So it was a fascinating and weird fight. But look, I think where the crypto industry went is, reminding that it's still extremely potentially damaging to developer activities, and that the calls, I think, from the crypto community are for a very loud response from the DOJ to basically drop the charges, not pursue second trials on sort of the big counts, and have much more sort of strong guidance around the particular issue that he did get caught up on.
Yeah, I think that's the most important note that I learned yesterday from having a bunch of lawyers on Crypto Town Hall, was that the two that were hung could still be recharged by the DOJ, basically. So as much as it's over, it's only over in the context of this trial. Maybe that's unlikely, but it is possible.
Yeah, exactly. I think unfortunately that even if it ends up going well, it's still going to have a bit of a freezing effect on developers who look, if it's this close, that's too close, right? For comfort, basically.
Totally. So let's dive into many things Trump and executive orders. I would say that this might be the biggest unlock we've seen yet. Trump signs order easing path for private assets and 401ks, notably Bitcoin, crypto, real estate, private equity. This is not just a crypto order, and actually something that is very sensible. Why should people be able to put whatever they want in their retirement accounts? I've seen political takes on this, and it just blows my mind because this is just so reasonable.
Yeah.
I was hoping it was going to be for IRAs as well, and I didn't see language on that because the original reports of this, by the way, this news broke weeks ago that this would happen, but that, there's all these self-directed IRA companies that you can sort of opt out of the main IRAs, and you can already do these things. So I was surprised that we didn't see language specifically on those, but still a huge unlock. You're talking about $12.5 trillion of available money that can now theoretically, we'll see how the mechanics work, but invest in crypto and Bitcoin tax-free in a retirement account. To me, the even bigger unlock is, who do you think's opening a new 401k? It's not 50-year-olds who have been saving for years. It's going to be people getting their first jobs at corporations who are in their 20s and already understand crypto, and are going to go straight to Bitcoin and crypto as opposed to any of these other assets.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is just, I think to your point, it's, we talked about this a little bit when the news first broke. It's great to see it actually come to fruition. It's just skating where the world is headed. This is just, this is the way that it has to trend, right? Hold aside even the fact that in general, I think it's a losing proposition to try to overly control the financial decisions that people do and don't make. But second, to your point, just where generationally people are, that's the profile of what they want to invest in is just totally different.
Yeah, and that's just one of a few, I'll call them crypto-friendly executive orders that were non-specific necessarily to crypto. The second one, of course, was Trump signs order targeting banks over political discrimination. So this is crypto discrimination, but also very specifically discrimination against conservatives by banks. This is actually nuanced and interesting because I think everybody agrees that Choke Point 2.0 is a problem and that targeting by banks is a problem. But also important to remember that a lot of these banks did it on guidance and threats from the federal government and those agencies. And this isn't necessarily addressing that side of it.
Yeah. So good, bad, right? Good is that it's a good reminder that it's very different to make big proclamations around how you shouldn't do an Operation Choke Point than to actually have mechanisms to ensure that it doesn't happen again. We had proclamations last time that you shouldn't do it again, and then it happened again, right? So I think that it's good that we're seeing an orientation towards action. Now, practically, what makes this type of activity so insidious is that it's whispers and suggestions. It's not things that are written down. It's basically playing on conservative risk mitigation policies that banks have to just, it's not worth it, right? And so it's very, very difficult to actually kind of identify a locus of power where you can even, kind of make these issues. However, to the other point, it did feel to a lot of people fairly retributive in this case, and not really about like an actual analysis of where the root problem was. Caitlin Long called that out immediately. She's basically like, this is pointed in the wrong direction. The banks did this not because the banks, a priori hated crypto, although certainly some of them were more enthusiastic. Hello, Bank of America. But it was guidance from the government, and so to the extent that we're taking actions, that's sort of the directionality that maybe we want to be pointed in.
But as I said, this language actually specifically is about politically targeted.
Yeah.
Right. So what do you think of the crypto Operation Choke Point 2.0 being lumped in with Trump basically saying, hey, there was a couple banks that wouldn't give me accounts, so conservatives have been targeted? I haven't just seen, I've dug deeply into Operation Choke Point 2.0. I haven't dug deeply into the political side of banks not giving people accounts.
Look, to the extent that it's a real thing, it's a thing that shouldn't happen. And, Operation Choke Point 2.0 is just Operation Choke Point in general. This type of policy is the single greatest example of why you shouldn't wish bad things on your enemies, because we live in a political system where the pendulum swings, and, you might like that banks and guns and, whatever was blocked, on that side. But as soon as it goes the other way and it's access to reproductive care or things that, that is important to your political position, it becomes very clear why this is a problem. So look, I don't have a super strong opinion on how endemic or widespread conservative blocking is. I would prefer in general to not have crypto like lumped in with culture war issues to the extent that that's what's happening. But it's a very obvious and important thing not to be happening, regardless of which group gets targeted for what reason. So I'm okay with it, even if it's a little bit of a lumping.
Yeah, it's like the Senate supermajority. I mean, unintended consequences of things you do to screw your enemy at first that end up inevitably coming back to bite you in the ass when you want something done a few years later. Welcome to the United States government. It's a wonderful place. Trump did something else, though, and maybe this addresses a bit of that other side, because Trump picked crypto-friendly economist Stephen Moran for Federal Reserve Board seat. Trump surprise Fed pick buys him time on chair selection. So we know that he's been bullying Powell for ages here, but I think he got an opportunity when we saw the last Fed governor last week step down to put someone friendly in already. When we're talking about Operation Choke Point 2.0, a lot of that guidance came down from the Fed. So having another Fed governor that's clearly crypto friendly could be addressing that side of the issue to some degree, but also aligning the Fed with Trump in advance of Powell stepping down or having his term run out.
Yeah. I mean, this is it's pretty clear that this is the playbook. Frankly, for people who enjoy separation of powers, this is a much more comfortable way of exerting influence than trying to fire the Powell early. So it is what it is. I think, net, like you said, I'm glad to have people who are sort of pro crypto in the positions of power. And I do think that, is going to contribute to pro crypto policies.
What a week. I think we actually just cooked through all of the stories relatively quickly. It's almost like you can't even give them enough time, because I don't know if we have 4 hours or if we're going to get through it in 25 minutes. But I just think these are monster stories.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are now very firmly in the period of actions, not words. And that's a really nice place to be, right? We were for a long time, like last year, this time we lived in the realm of the possibility. What if, there's a big structural change in the administration and all these things came to fruition and we didn't have to fight these fights? Then for a long time, we were in the phase of like, okay, now we're here, and there's big, bold pronouncements and, like work that is now assigned to different departments. And now finally we're turning the corner into action phase. And part of the reason that I think it goes fast and that we have so much is that there's a lot of action to be done. So I think it's encouraging that we sort of have more than we can easily cover every week.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's people who still are dismissive of the efforts of the administration or the change because we don't have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, or there's one or two things that haven't been fully met. But I don't care about your political positioning, what you think of Donald Trump, whether you're a liberal or a conservative. They're doing 95% of what they talked about and more.
Yep.
You can't really fault them if you're a crypto advocate for the things they're doing. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, but I would also say, for the screechers, keep screeching, because that's the only way that people do, get all the way.
Got to climb a wall of worry. Still, there has
Yeah.
to be worry.
Absolutely.
If we get full consensus, it's going to be time to go.
Yeah.
All right, guys, give NLW a follow. Obviously, listen to the breakdown every single day. The best podcast out there, even better than this one, which sometimes falls on the breakdown. So I guess we do get the crossover, man. Thank you very much, as always. I'll see you next week.
Cheers, guys.
Let's go.